So, the recent US military action in Venezuela just lit up the internet with all sorts of theories. But what if the most common ones, the ones you see everywhere, are missing the real story? Today, we're going to cut through all that noise and get to the deep strategic game that's actually being played.
I'm sure you've seen this one, right? It's an oil war. Or they're trying to save the US dollar. These ideas are all over the place. But do they really tell us what's going on?
What if this had nothing to do with a sudden dollar collapse, or even about the price of oil today? The analysis we're looking at suggests this was a very deliberate move in a much, much bigger game of global power and, you guessed it, leverage. Okay, so let's push past all those surface level takes. Let's really break down the strategic thinking that went into a geopolitical move this big. So here's what went down. After years of sanctions and trying to apply diplomatic pressure, the U.S. took direct military action, and that resulted in the capture of President Nicolas Maduro. This, of course, raises the huge question, why this and why now? Well, the answer, according to this analysis, isn't panic. Not at all. Instead, this was a calculated move. It was the next logical step in a long-term strategy that's all about securing power and leverage on the world stage. And this, right here, reframes the entire event. See, the real goal wasn't just about solving a problem in Venezuela today. It was about locking in a powerful position for the future, especially as the world gets more and more fragmented and, frankly, a lot more unstable. And look, this move didn't just come out of thin air. It's been building. For years, the U.S. tried financial sanctions, they tried diplomatic pressure, they even tried legal action to get Maduro out. But when those tools, economic and soft power, don't get the job done, well, history tells us that escalation is usually what comes next. Now, this brings us to the economic side of things. But there's a really important twist here. This isn't about the oil that Venezuela is barely managing to produce right now. No, this is about all the oil that's still under the ground. So this is absolutely key. You have to separate these two things in your mind. Venezuela's current oil production, in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty minimal. The real prize, the huge strategic asset, is its future supply. We're talking about one of the largest proven reserves on the entire planet. And that is the heart of the strategy. If you can gain influence over Venezuela's future oil, you get a say in who produces it, who finances it, and, this is the big one, who gets first dibs in a global shortage. That is real power, and you have it long before a single new barrel even comes out of the ground. Okay, so how does this connect back to, say, the U.S. economy? Well, it's a pretty fascinating chain reaction. When you secure a huge future supply of oil, you change the market's expectations. And when traders believe there's going to be plenty of oil in the long run, that risk premium, that extra cost that gets baked into prices because of uncertainty, it starts to come down. That helps lower oil prices today, which is a really powerful tool for cooling down inflation back home. You can see how this approach fits perfectly with that whole drill baby drill philosophy, right? It's this idea of using energy policy, both at home and, in this case, abroad, as a direct lever to juice the economy, instead of just relying on things like fiddling with interest rates. But this was never just about economics, not even close. There was a huge geopolitical signal being sent here. And you can bet the main audience wasn't in Caracas. It was in Beijing. See, over the years, Venezuela had become more and more tied into China's energy and financial systems. From a U.S. strategic point of view, that crossed a major line. So this action wasn't about defending the dollar. It was about enforcing a sphere of influence. Think of it as a 21st century version of the Monroe Doctrine, basically saying that this hemisphere is not up for grabs by rival powers. And that right there is the biggest takeaway. This was a message to the entire world. It was telling both allies and adversaries that sanctions and financial pressure are not the final options. The ability to escalate, well, that's still very much on the table. All right, so to really understand what this was all about, we also have to be crystal clear on what it wasn't about. So let's just quickly bust some of the biggest myths that have been floating around. Let's run through these. First, this was not some last-ditch panic move to save the petrodollar, and it wasn't a direct reaction to oil being sold in yuan. The real strategy is way deeper than currency games. Second, while the public reasons given often talk about democracy or fighting drugs, the analysis here points to a core driver that is purely strategic. And finally, this goes way beyond just U.S. energy independence. This is about influencing the entire global energy market for decades to come.
So, where does this all leave us? A move this big, well, it's gonna have ripples, and those ripples are going to be felt for years. And not all of them were necessarily going to be good for the United States. And here's the really uncomfortable truth, the central paradox of this whole thing. While this action is a definite short term win, it also sends a very loud message to every other country out there. Relying too much on the US led system has its risks. And that can actually speed up their efforts to hedge, to build their own alternative financial and political systems so they're less vulnerable. Which leads us to this final, really powerful idea. At the end of the day, what happened in Venezuela is just the catalyst. The real story is how the rest of the world saw this display of power and how they're now adjusting their own long-term plans because of it. And that's the big question we're left with, isn't it? It's a classic strategic dilemma. Is securing an advantage today worth speeding up the creation of a more fragmented, more multipolar world tomorrow? There is no easy answer, and that's what makes this such a critical story for us to understand.